So this is a loaf of cinnamon raisin bread that I make once in a while as a treat. We'll go through the ingredients. 600 grams or 4 cups of all-purpose flour, 1 cup of raisins, 2 tablespoons of ground cinnamon, 2 tablespoons of light brown sugar, 1.5 teaspoons of yeast, that's active dry yeast, 1.5 teaspoons of salt, 450 ml of water, and we're going to let that sit for 8 to 10 hours at room temperature. So we'll start off by weighing our flour. We'll tare our scale, kitchen scale, and I always do use a kitchen scale for baking. So 600 grams is roughly 4 leveled off cups of flour. You can use bread flour if you want. All purpose seems to work okay. This does make a little bit of a heavier loaf because of the ingredients are a little bit heavier. Raisins and some of the spices are a bit heavy. So we'll add our light brown sugar, our 2 tablespoons of cinnamon, our active dry yeast, and our salt. And we'll mix those together before the raisins. Use a wire whisk. You got to make sure this is really well incorporated together. You don't want any dark streaks in your loaf, and you want the flavor to be consistent throughout the loaf as well. So make sure you take some time to stir it in really well. It doesn't take very long. We'll add our raisins. You can use whatever raisins of your choice, light or dark or sultanas. It's your own personal choice. I like the darker ones. So just give that a mix to make sure there's no clumps of raisins together, that they're all separated. And then we'll add our 450 ml of room temperature water. Just tap water is fine. So you can see right away the color changes. I mean, the cinnamon and the brown sugar will turn your dough brown. Nice golden brown color. So slowly work in your water with, I have a dough whisk. You could use a wooden spoon or a plastic spoon or whatever you want. But I find the dough whisk to initially mix the water into the dough works really well. It's a very sturdy tool. And you're going to end up with a shaggy looking dough like this. You think, wow, maybe that's not enough water. But as long as you get all your ingredients together, it will self-knead itself over the 8 to 10 hours. The water that exists in the mixture will work its way through everything. Okay, so get all your dry bits of flour mixed in well, but you don't have to knead. This is a no-knead recipe. So there's no machines, no bread machine, no stand mixer. It's a pretty easy recipe. So here I have a spatula that's a flexible end, so I'm just kind of pressing everything together, making sure any dry flour is mixed in. And even if there is dry flour on the bottom of the bowl, during the no-knead process, 8 to 10 hours, that's going to get absorbed into the mixture. So you'll see what the results are after that period of time has elapsed. So don't be tempted to add too much extra water. Maybe a tablespoon if you really need to, but it should be fine the way this is. Okay, so I press it down, just kind of make a uniform layer, and scrape the sides a bit. So we're going to put a lid on and cover it well, and we're going to move it to an area of the house that's doesn't have big temperature swings. So 70 to 73 degrees roughly for 8 to 10 hours. The longer the better. Minimum 8 hours. the yeast has to have time to work its way through the mixture, and you'll see the results here. I'll do a bit of a close-up. You can see the bubbles, the little holes there. That's signs of activity. So this was after 8 hours. If you let it go longer, it'll definitely develop a little bit more flavor. So this is after exactly 8 hours. So you'll scoop it out. It is a sticky dough at this point. But what we're going to do is put it onto a floured working surface. In this case, I have a cutting board with a well-floured surface. So just scoop it out. And just add a little bit of flour on top just to make it easier to work with so your hands aren't sticking. And just kind of punch it down, push out some of the extra air. Now this loaf is a little bit more dense than your average bread or pizza dough, so you don't really have to spend too much time punching. There's not a lot of air to punch out, so you're just kind of folding over, making it into a rough dough ball. Sticking a couple of raisins. Some of the raisins try to escape, so you have to kind of catch them before they run off the stove and stick them back in. So just make a rough ball. Pat it down a bit. And we're going to grab a bowl. Give a little squirt of your favorite oil. And we're going to coat on both sides with oil. This is to prevent it from drying out during the first rise. Okay, and it's important. If you don't want to develop a hard layer on top of the dough. So you can see this dough is not that easy to work with yet before the first rise. Now our oven has a proofing cycle which simulates the oven light being on. So we're going to put it in the oven, covered. You can put it on a counter as well, as long as it's room temperature, not too cold. But I always put it in our oven and put the proofing cycle on and the oven light. And that gives it a nice warm environment to do its thing. And that's about 40 minutes to an hour, depending on, you can always check it after 40 minutes, but usually around 40 to 45 minutes is fine. So here I'm using, I make this mixture of a non-stick recipe that I can share in the description, and that's just a loaf pan that I'm applying that to. So here you can see this is the first rise. So it's it's gone up, pretty much doubled in size again. You can see some bubbles. So we're going to punch that down again. I'm just using a spatula here to scoop it out, and it's a little bit easier to work with this time. So there's not a lot of air, but you just want to kind of press it down a little bit. So what I'm doing is folding it over, and I'm going to start making my loaf shape before I put it in my loaf pan. Again, it's a more dense loaf because of the ingredients as opposed to a pizza dough or a regular loaf, white loaf of bread. So just roughly shape it into the form that you want. And if you're choosing to use a loaf pan, whether nonstick or whatever you want, I did put a little bit of mixture in there to make sure it doesn't stick, and you'll see how easy it comes out after it bakes. Okay, so we're just kind of roughly forming it. It's going to rise once we put it in the oven. Here I'm adding some saran wrap with a little bit of cooking spray, so when it rises it does not stick to the saran wrap. So we'll put it in for 40 minutes, or as long as it takes. So there you go after 40 minutes. What you want to see is it rise over the lip of the loaf pan if you're using a loaf pan. So something like that is a little bit better. You want more air pockets in your loaf if you can. So now we're ready to bake, and we're going to do 40 minutes at 350. This is non-convection. You can use convection, but probably shorten your times a bit. And there you go, 40 minutes at 350. And there's the end result. Now sometimes I put an egg wash, a couple of eggs, take the yolks out, and gives it a nice shiny brown topping or coating. So this is without any egg wash or any butter, but you can certainly add that. It's a little more aesthetically pleasing to put some egg wash, but I don't always do that. So here I'm going to slice it.
Ow! 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 Ow!
Now I didn't really wait long enough for it to be firm, so it's kind of a little bit too soft for cutting, but yeah, it is what it is. But you can see there's lots of nice texture and air pockets, and it's risen nicely. So one cup of raisins gives you a good amount of raisins per slice. You don't really want to go too many raisins. It gets a little bit too dense and doesn't rise as well. So there you go. You can add other spices as well, nutmeg or whatever you choose, but this is just cinnamon and your raisins. So yeah, it's really good. So thanks for watching, everyone. Please be sure to subscribe to the channel and ring the bell for notification of upcoming videos. Thank you.